Hi, everybody. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Politics with Sherry Jacobus. Thank you for subscribing. And if you're not a subscriber yet, I hope you'll help me out and hit that button. So the rhetoric now is getting pretty heated. We have Speaker Mike Johnson saying, it doesn't help when we've got the left calling us fascists. Well, then stop being fascists. Would you rather we call you Nazi or Nazi sympathizers? And I say this because Brian Kilmeade, the Fox News, Fox and Friends co-host in the morning, big show, big audience. He's worked for Fox for a long time, big Trumper. The other day on Fox and Friends, as you may have heard, they were talking about homeless people, mentally ill people, including veterans, and how we should just kill them, just with a shot, just euthanize them. Well, this kind of makes you sound like a Nazi, buddy. Is it cheaper and easier and less messy than gas chambers and ovens? So don't blame us when we accurately describe what you are. Now, Kilmeade issued, I guess, what was an apology. It sounded more like a defense of himself. And he hasn't been fired. He has not been fired. So at this point, his co-host, what's that? You remember how you've heard that saying? If there's one Nazi sitting at a table with, 11 other people, or then you've got 12 Nazis, or something along those lines, or one person sitting at a table with 12 Nazis. You all are Nazis, or at the very least, what Nazi sympathizers. An apology doesn't cut it. Tolerating it for these few days doesn't cut it. The fact that he was not immediately fired doesn't cut it. And everybody at Fox News who continues to work there, including you too, Sean Hannity, because you're the big name there, you condone this. That makes you a Nazi. These aren't things that we'd like to talk about on social media, including here on YouTube. They say these are sensitive subjects, but this is the news of our day. This is where we are. And you can't censor this stuff. You can't say, well, we can't talk about it because we don't use those words on these things. But what else are you supposed to do when a major talk show co-host of the biggest cable network in the biggest show calls for the extermination, the involuntary extermination, euthanasia of people that he doesn't want to exist? Homeless people, mentally ill people. To say it's a slippery slope is an understatement, clearly. What's next? Disabled kids, sick people. There is a pattern here, folks. The reason RFK Jr. is dismantling basically the FDA and all of our everything to protect us is they do want the most vulnerable of us to die. Trump has bragged, as I've noted here before, that during the pandemic he saved something like $156 billion in Social Security. The savings was because these were preventable deaths, that he withheld information, as we later found out from Bob Woodward. He knew this was coming. He knew how bad it was going to be. He did it anyway. And a big portion of those deaths were the most vulnerable among us, the elderly. And when they die, they stop receiving Social Security. So it is savings by attrition, I guess, is what we call it in the vernacular. I used to work on Capitol Hill. So, we cannot be chastised or censured for talking about things that are right there in front of us every day. People are upset when they show the video of Charlie Kirk's assassination. Are we becoming desensitized? I don't know. I'm sure it was a lot cleaner and neater than when you've got little kids they're having their heads blown off in schools, churches. So our selective outrage is such, I don't know, maybe Congress, Republicans in Congress in particular, who are owned by the NRA, maybe they need to see the photographs of the little school kids after they're murdered, after a school shooting, a mass shooting. Maybe that will wake them up. I always say that about, eating pork or even beef, if you could see our slaughter practices and you see how they raise the animals. And pigs have the mentality of a 3-year-old human child. They know what's going on. They suffer. If we saw how we raised and our slaughter practices, you'd never eat animals again, mammals anyway. You just wouldn't. You couldn't. And that's why we don't call them pigs and cows. We call them pork and beef. Anyway, sidebar here. So we are selectively choosing our sensibilities and what we're supposed to be sensitive to. Brian Kilmeade has said about the worst thing I've ever heard anyone say on television, somebody who knows, but and he meant it. And he meant it. And they didn't fire him right away, I guess, because he's too valuable. You know, when NBC fired Megyn Kelly for talking about blackface, her ratings were kind of down, but they still paid her off. So, you know, don't kid yourself that how these decisions are made. If you're really valuable and you're a moneymaker for the network, they're going to let you apologize and get away with it if they think they can. But I think they were looking to cut Megyn loose anyway because she wasn't getting the ratings, because different audience. The 9 p.m. Fox News audience of men, where she's looking like she's, you know, dressed up for a date, sitting across a table for dinner and drinks, is very different than a Today Show morning crowd of mostly women. And many of them stay at home mothers or older and past the workforce. So, you know, you look at how MSNBC fired contributor Matthew Dowd because he said that Charlie Kirk, with his rhetoric and the stuff that he espoused loudly with his big crowd, you know, something like this was bound to happen. He accurately described Kirk. We have Terry Moran, who accurately described Stephen Miller and gets fired. And Brian Kilmeade gets to stay for saying that we should just kill the homeless and the mentally ill. Involuntarily, he used the word, involuntarily, with a shot. So we have a warning from pre-Nazi Germany. The rise of blusterous man bewilders the educated among us, conjoins opposing politicians, agonizes our international allies, threatens minorities, spits on the disabled, and touches the hearts of those who just don't know any better. Let's stop propounding how mad this all is and instead do something. Lieslate Hubner, Germany, 1929. I'm sure I'm butchering that name. And remember, it was Donald Trump who said illegal immigrants are poisoning the blood of our country, echoing word for word, almost word for word, what Adolf Hitler said about Jews before exterminating them in the Holocaust. There's a lot more there. We know that. So if language matters, then it has to matter across the board. It has to. I was recently on an Iranian network. I sometimes do foreign TV, and I did use the word fascist or fascism to describe Trump and this Trump regime. And on the air, the anchor said, "We don't use that word." And I'm thinking, no, it's my word. I don't work for you. I've been brought on as a guest commentator, and this was the issue we were talking about. I will use the word. Okay? So maybe we need to have, this isn't even about freedom of speech. This is about what are we doing as a society where we let the Brian Kilmeades of the world keep his job, and in a few weeks, you know, he'll be yucking it up with the president, and he'll have on, you know, different people. They'll all act like this is okay. Giving him a pass. And yet they're calling on us to watch our language. Are you freaking kidding me? Are you kidding me? We cannot let ourselves be silenced because we are exposing them. The words we use are the words to describe what they are doing. And when we get to the point where we are not allowed to talk about it in media, on social media, maybe here on YouTube, I don't call that censoring so much as silencing. We are talking about the president of the United States. We are talking about Congress and our leaders and our position in the world and what is happening. But because the words that must be used to describe it are harsh and prohibited, We can't talk about it. And it's not name calling. We are now accurately describing these people, accurately describing them. So I do think that that's a problem that's going to get worse as you see people get fired for accurately describing or showing legitimate, necessary outrage at, say, a Stephen Miller or a Kilmeade or something Trump says or does. It's not okay. And we know that Charlie Kirk is now, oh, the flag's flown at half staff. Trump called it half mast. That's a ship, by the way. Half mast is a ship, half staff is on land. But he's a moron. So this guy is being canonized. And we find out now the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, wants the social media and everything for military personnel to be scoured to see if they criticize Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk called for the public execution of Joe Biden when he was president and was pondering, this was on his show, pondering on the air about how young is too young for a child to be allowed to watch such a public execution of Joe Biden. And then he went on to describe how much he would love himself to watch. He says, I want to see it in the public square. Okay. Well, now, in large part to his own rhetoric, maybe, depending who's really behind this, maybe not understanding on which side his bread is buttered and getting too arrogant, not knowing who actually owns him and controls him. But now Charlie Kirk's children, when they're older, his daughters, who won't remember him, obviously, but they will be seeing the footage of his public assassination. That is really ironic. But he openly said he wanted this for Joe Biden. He has said he wouldn't trust flying on a plane with a black pilot. He said black women are too stupid and don't deserve their jobs. And he started naming high-profile black women, including Kamala Harris, I believe, and a Supreme Court justice. This is who he is. He tells girls to skip college, get an MRS degree, be submissive to your husbands. Now there's a GoFundMe for his family, even though he was worth $14 million. And I do fully expect his wife to become a Fox News contributor and eventually have her own show. This is the cheapness of our culture these days, the extreme cheapness of us. So just when we are finding the gumption to use the words, the very difficult words, to accurately describe what is happening regarding our president, our Congress, their media, we finally get the gumption to do that after all those years of tiptoeing around Merrick Garland. And now we're being silenced. And the Secretary of Defense even silencing soldiers, military personnel, on comments about a private citizen. Charlie Kirk is a private citizen. Full stop. And our government is now going to punish, I guess, severely punish anyone who criticizes a private citizen who called for the execution, public execution of a president of the United States, openly racist, white supremacist. Okay? You've seen the videos floating around of the various things that Charlie Kirk has said. They are atrocious. He was an atrocious person. Absolutely atrocious. Full stop.